My name is Arthur. I've been a trucker for various companies for the better part of 15 years now. Things have become pretty routine at this point. Pick up the goods and materials, verify them for accuracy, and deliver them as instructed. We're not paid by the hour, so efficiency is the most important thing in this line of work. For someone like me who's been doing this forever, I like to think I can outwork all these young guns that are snapping these jobs up. This isn't always great, though. Usually, I push myself to the absolute limit when it comes to functioning on barely any sleep. 4 years ago, I was working for a warehouse based in North Dakota. For anyone who doesn't know, North Dakota is one of the flattest states, which makes trucking a little easier. This also meant that skipping out on a few hours of sleep could mean the difference between employment and getting the sack. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in May. The beginning of the week meant that more loads needed to be shipped, which meant more work for me. I wanted to knock it all out in one shot, so I traced my route into Montana accordingly, planning on not stopping even once to sleep. I hit the road a few hours after lunch, expecting to reach my destination very early the next morning. I pushed the semi as much as possible, doing maybe a couple over the speed limit. It was getting late, and I remember rubbing the crust from my eyelids as the clock ticked past midnight. I was having trouble keeping my eyes open, but I only had about an hour left in this drive, so I gritted my teeth and kept going. My buddy Tristan, who was also a trucker, introduced me to smelling salts when I first started out. If you don't know, smelling salts are basically some kind of crystals in a little bottle. One sniff and you're wide awake. You had to be careful, though. Too many back-to-back uses could be dangerous, or at least that's what Tristan told me. They burn your nose a little bit, but whenever I needed a boost, I'd reach for the smelling salts first. This was one of those times. I took a big whiff and shot my head back, my reflexes taking over. I felt the adrenaline course through my body and hoped the feeling would last the rest of the drive. A half hour shot by, and I was really struggling. I felt myself start to doze off, and the blare of my truck drifting into the shoulder jolted me awake. This was getting dangerous, I thought. I had to pull off. I was all alone on the highway, but there was nowhere to pull off. There were just woods on either side of me. I slowed the truck down, searching desperately for somewhere to pull over. At this low speed, my headlights pierced through the darkness, and I was able to see a lot more. As I looked around, I saw something that confused me. There was a purple dress lying in the middle of the road. What the hell, I thought, rubbing my eyes. Was I hallucinating? I blinked like 6 times just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. It was real. I approached the dress with my truck and stared at it as I rolled by. In hindsight, this should have been more of a red flag, but I think I was just too exhausted to process what was going on. About 200 or so yards away, I passed a pair of shoes. Now I was starting to freak out. What the hell was going on? I passed the shoes, praying to God there would be a place to pull off soon. My old man Finn was a super religious guy, so I clutched his old cross and hoped he would come through for me. A little further up the road, I saw a bunch more random clothing, some of which looked like little kids' clothing. This time, I stopped the truck. The panic started to set in. Something was very, very wrong. I sat in the driver's seat with the truck at a standstill. I was expecting something to happen, but it never did. So I did what my instincts told me to do. I stepped out of the truck and went to inspect the clothing. I still remember the feeling of the chilly morning air piercing my skin, which definitely helped my exhaustion. I approached the pile as cautiously as I could. It was indeed kids' clothing. It looked like there were both boy and girl pieces of clothing in the pile. I looked around into the woods, but I couldn't see much of anything in the darkness. I had my head on a swivel, worried that this was some kind of trap. I decided it was not my business to figure out what was going on, so I made my way back to my truck. Just then, I heard a crunch from the left. I whipped around, trying to see what was there. I stood there, waiting to hear another sound. After about 30 seconds, there was another crunch, but this time from the opposite side of the road. My survival instincts kicked in, and I sprinted towards the truck. I jumped into the front seat, but just before I slammed the door, I heard a child's scream ring out. I froze, my heart bursting out of my chest. I was caught at a crossroads. I wasn't going to fight some random people in pitch-black woods, but I couldn't just abandon some helpless kids either. Before I could make a decision, another almost identical child's scream rang out. Without thinking, I turned the truck on and pointed its nose toward the spot in the woods where I heard the noise. My headlights lit up about 30 yards into the woods. There were 3 or 4 people, one of whom was holding a massive speaker. They ducked behind a couple of trees as my truck lit them up, but I had exposed them for just enough time to make out what they were doing. They hid from the light before I could really make out any distinctive features, but I swear on my old man Finn's grave, they were holding up a speaker, trying to lure me into the woods with a fake kid screaming. I was just in shock. I just sat there staring at the trees those people had just hidden behind. I reached for my phone to call the police, but before I finished dialing, I heard a thump from the body of the truck. Someone had thrown something from the other direction. I was done. I turned back to face the road and slammed on the gas. As I sped off, I could make out a person on the other side of the road. He shouted something I couldn't understand before launching something at the truck that cracked the glass of my passenger side window. I drove the final hour in silence. I was too scared to process what had just happened, but there was no way in hell I was stopping to sleep in those woods. I completed my delivery and then knocked out. I must have slept for 10 hours straight. When I woke up, the first thing I did was call the police, who told me they'd investigate those woods and give me any updates. I then thought about We were hitchhiking through Europe, my then boyfriend and I, and on our way back home, a truck driver picked us up. We had had a few weird encounters on our trip before, but we had been on the road for about a month, and nothing really scary happened until we met this guy. He was a young guy, about 25, quite regular, spoke English okay, and had been away from home for a long time. I was a bit younger, with my boyfriend being around his age. My boyfriend was tired, so he took a seat on the bed in the truck and wasn't really trying to hold a conversation. During our trip, we switched turns as I usually do when I hitchhike with someone. One person talks with the driver, and the other relaxes in the back, so I was in the passenger seat. I think my boyfriend was even dozing off a little bit when the driver started complimenting me and asking about my boyfriend. It was still fine, nothing too weird, and I was just trying to talk to be good company. As we moved on, I started to feel a bit uncomfortable, but I didn't let anything on and only told my boyfriend that we should find truck drivers from our country to make the last part of our trip in one go. I translated this to English immediately because the truck driver became agitated and suspicious of what I was saying. I explained that we were really tired and our plan was to find our truck drivers before he had to take a long break so that we could continue traveling without interruption. We stopped for a short break at a gas station, and my boyfriend decided he was going to look for another truck driver in the parking lot, leaving me with this guy alone. Damn, the truck driver came on to me real hard, and I was scared shitless and didn't fight back. I could feel how aroused he was, and there was no doubt about his intentions. Luckily, my boyfriend was away for just a minute. At that moment, I realized we needed to get out of this situation fast. I didn't want to say anything to my boyfriend because I was scared of how he would react, so I decided to pretend nothing had happened. I was determined to get out at the next stop. We reached a large gas station for truck drivers only and told our driver we were going to look for other drivers heading our way. During our trip to this station, this guy got in touch with another driver, saying he could also take us, maybe one at a time. Damn, I thought, now he's planning a threesome. When I was finally alone with my boyfriend, I remained calm, hinted at what had happened, and insisted that we not stay with this driver no matter what. It took us about 5 minutes to find a group of truck drivers from our country. They were having beers and cracking jokes, and 2 of them agreed to take us. I jumped with joy. We went back to the truck to get our things. The guy had already brought his friend along and was offering my boyfriend to take a shower at the gas station, saying he would pay for him for no obvious reason. He was quite persistent, and as I very well remember, he never offered it to me. Needless to say, these 2 guys were very disappointed to see us go. I still remember how they were looking at me when I was taking our backpacks from the truck. I have never told my ex-boyfriend the details. I was just lucky that we got away from that truck driver, and I think he has never realized how bad the situation was. At that time, I was playing it cool the whole time, but inside, I was shaking. I could see how desperate that truck driver was and how much he wanted to get rid of my boyfriend. I was so angry at myself for staying with him in the truck by myself, but then all of our things were there. I was also angry for not fighting him back, but it was so sudden, and I got really scared. Well, I would never hitchhike alone. I was 18 at the time and had just started college, living out of state on my own for the first time. I had a pretty sheltered life. I am also a female, so my first semester at my out-of-state college had just ended. It was May, and I was on my way home from my brother's wedding. I'm about an hour away from my current residence, with a little over 3 hours left of my trip. Everything is going great, and I'm just cruising with the traffic. It was a notably busy day for that particular stretch of interstate, somewhere on I-40 in Tennessee. As I said, all was well until I checked my mirror. There was a truck a little farther back from the side of my car in the lane next to me. I could see his headlights in my passenger side mirror. I looked up because, even though it was the middle of the afternoon and super sunny out, this dude was flashing his lights at me. I tried to brush it off and assumed he just wanted to get into my lane, so I tried moving. He stayed behind me the whole time, not letting any other cars get between us. He kept flashing his lights at me, and I looked up at him. He waved and honked. This was a red flag, but I took it the wrong way. I thought, oh, I wonder if he's signaling me to pull over. I hope nothing is wrong with my car. The only reason I thought this was because, the week before, I had gotten a hole in my tire and had it patched. I was worried that the patch had fallen out and that my tire was going flat as I traveled. I'm freaking out about my car and plan to pull off at the next exit. Fortunately, it comes up quickly, and there is a gas station with some customers visible from the exit ramp. I head there and pull up at a gas pump. Curiously, the trucker follows me off the interstate and into the same parking lot, but he parks in a designated truck zone. I get out just before he parks and walk around my car, doing a quick inspection. I see him start to get out of his truck, and I decide to buy gas, even though I filled up before I left. As I swiped my card to pay for my gas, the truck driver had reached my car. Lucky for me, since I was already pretty freaked out by him following me off the exit, I had my phone in my hand with 911 already dialed, so I would just have to hit the call button. I left my driver door open and stayed between that and the gas hose, with him standing a few feet away from the back end of my car, the hose separating us. The first thing this guy says to me is, "Well, aren't you a pretty thing?" I'm screaming in my head now, imagining all possible scenarios for an emergency escape. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s and about 170 pounds. Me, I was 18, 125 pounds, without much muscle or fat anywhere on me. I wouldn't have been able to fight back much anyway. I told him thank you. He offered to buy my gas, and I declined, saying my parents gave me money. I was actually worried that he would expect something in return if I had taken his offer. He asked me questions like where I was from, where I was going, etc. Something went off in my head that just said lie, so I did. I didn't tell him what college I really went to, where I was really headed, or what I was doing. Nothing. My gas was done pumping after about a minute. With that, I told him goodbye, jumped in my car, and got out of there. I kept an eye on him as I left, making sure he didn't follow me any longer, and he didn't. I never saw him again. I don't know what he wanted with me that day, whether it was just to tell me how attractive I was or if he had something much worse planned. I really regret not reporting him to the police. This happened when my now husband and I were moving from the east to the west coast of the US. This had been our second time making this trip, and this one was just to pick up a few last things and grab our 2 dogs. At this point, we were just trying to make good time since we were tired of being on the road and would only stop for food and restroom breaks. So we weren't strangers to rest stops at odd hours of the day. I can't remember what state this happened in because we do a lot of traveling, and rest stops have all blurred together over the years. Anyways, my husband had been driving for a while, and it was time to switch off, walk the dogs, and stretch our legs. So we pulled into a rest stop around 3 o'clock or 4 a.m. There was only one other vehicle in the lot, most likely with someone sleeping inside of it, and not that many truckers in the truck area, so the rest area was fairly empty. I jumped out of the car and let my husband know I was going to run into the restroom before I let the dogs out. While I ran in, he was going to hang out by the car to have a smoke and keep an eye on our dogs. However, we parked our car by the dog area, and to get to the restrooms, you had to walk over this hill. You couldn't see the restrooms from our car. Being late at night, my husband decided to walk most of the way with me to make sure I got there okay. I wasn't worried but didn't mind the extra comfort of having him there. I finished up in the restroom and came out to walk the dogs and let my husband take his restroom break. Even though it was late and I felt a bit cut off from the lighted area of the rest stop, I wasn't worried. I'm small and don't weigh much, but my dogs are German Shepherd mixes and very protective of me. Plus, I was taught self-defense at a young age and feel capable of defending myself if the time came. So I'm walking my dogs and letting them do their business when I noticed that one of the semi-trucks, which had been sitting on the far side of the stop, starts up and slowly drives in my direction. This didn't seem worrisome to me because they were on the trucker's side, and I assumed they were heading to the exit to get back onto the highway. I grabbed 2 doggy bags to clean up after my dogs and started heading to the trash can. As I'm walking, I'm suddenly blinded by bright headlights. I looked in the direction of the lights and saw that the semi, which I thought was leaving, had pulled up as close to the truck lot and car lot divide as possible and now had its brights aimed directly at me. Pissed off that someone was blinding me with their brights, I quickly tossed the poop bags away and started walking back to my car. As I'm walking away, the dude starts flashing his lights over and over again. I'm almost to my car, wondering if I'm missing something and becoming more and more irritated. He starts creeping his truck in my direction again while flashing his lights. My dog sensed my irritation and immediately went on alert, staring in the trucker's direction. I finally made my way to my car, and the guy is still flashing his lights while stopping his truck in my direction again. I don't scare easily, so I decided to stand there and glare in his direction. Then he finally stopped flashing his lights. Good, I assumed he was done and started getting my keys out to unlock the car. Suddenly, my dogs stiffened beside me, their hackles raised, and they began to growl. I heard the sound of a door opening and turned back in the trucker's direction. I saw his door was now opened, and I saw a foot starting to exit the truck. I'm sitting there thinking this guy is a complete idiot when, at this point, my husband shows up and wraps his arm around me while flipping the trucker off. The trucker's foot disappears back into his truck. He shuts his door and leaves the rest stop pretty fast. I told my husband about him flashing his lights, and he explained that truckers use this method to flag women down at rest stops for sex. I was grossed out. I'm guessing he thought I was alone because of how the rest stop was set up. However, I was in no way dressed like someone interested in random sex at a rest stop. I was wearing layers because it was cold and driving a newer car. Plus, what idiot thinks it's a good idea to try to approach someone with two huge dogs? Although I was never scared during the whole thing, I do think the situation was creepy because the guy was obviously not quite there and was acting pretty abrasive. A few months ago, I was driving back to school from visiting my parents. It's about a 2-hour drive, so I usually keep myself entertained with music. I'm a 5 feet 3 inches, 21-year-old female driving my dad's little old pickup truck alone in the leftmost lane of a 3-lane highway, dorking around to the music on the radio. Suddenly, I noticed a semi-truck going the exact same speed as me in the rightmost lane. Embarrassed for getting caught in dork mode, I stopped singing and tried to speed up so he couldn't see me anymore. He matched my speed, which ticked me off a little bit, so I looked at the driver, expecting to see some angry jerk. To my surprise, he was smiling and waving. Thrown off, I kind of chuckled and waved back. Big mistake. He moved over to the middle lane to be closer to me and now wouldn't stop smiling and waving. At first, I played nice, waving back a little because a semi-truck beats a tiny pickup truck any day. But I was mostly focusing on getting out of this guy's field of vision safely. I tried speeding up as fast as my truck would allow and slowing down as suddenly as I could without endangering anyone behind me, but he would just match my speed. If there was someone coming up in his lane, he'd move to the right at the last possible second and pass them before I could slow down and get behind them. He has a lot more practice with reckless maneuvering than I do, so he has me trapped and is using other cars to help him. The whole time, he's smiling, waving, and holding up the number 1 sign for some reason I still don't know. His charm is rapidly fading as this continues for about 5 miles. I got worried and called 911. I gave them a description of the truck: white cargo truck, black cab with some Pennsylvania company logo on it, and the driver was a balding, middle-aged tan guy with a dirty blue t-shirt. They advised me to pull off to the emergency shoulder on the left, but I had never done that and it looked too narrow, so I didn't feel comfortable doing that. At this point, he was passing someone else in the middle lane, and I finally had a chance to slow down and merge 2 lanes over to the rightmost lane. I started speeding past him so he couldn't trap me again. The operator told me to take the closest service plaza about 5 miles away. She said he probably wouldn't follow me, so I could stop there for a few minutes before getting back on the highway. She told me to call if he did follow me, but she was confident he probably wouldn't, so she hung up. Now he's still holding up the sign and smiling this creepy, increasingly perverted grin at me while I avoid eye contact. The service plaza is in a quarter mile, and I'm not using any turn signals, but I guess he knew what I was doing because he braked hard and merged behind me right at the last second to join me in exiting to the service plaza. After I got my heart to start back up from the coronary area just experienced, I called 911 again. The way this service plaza was set up was that semi-trucks had to use a separate lane winding to the right of the plaza that led to a parking lot behind the plaza just for big trucks. The rest of us used a smaller lane to park immediately in front of the plaza. I parked, and as I'm explaining to the new operator what's going on, I watched the semi creep around its path while the driver stared me down, smiling. I freaked out. He knew where I had parked, he knew where to find me. If I just stayed there, I thought maybe I could have floored it to get back on the highway, but I was afraid he would see me and follow me again. So, I drove to a gas station to the left of the plaza, which had a view of the semi-truck parking lot, hoping he wouldn't find me until the police came. The operator transferred me to the woman who was helping me before. She informed me that they had dispatched a couple of police cars but couldn't tell me how long they would be. I saw the trucker had gotten out of his truck and was heading towards me. Even though my windows were closed and my doors were locked, I was panicking on the phone with the operator. She told me the police should be there soon and that I should be safe there, so I should sit tight while I kept her updated. I wanted to at least drive back to the parking lot I was in before, but it was a one-way entrance to the gas station, so I couldn't. I glared at the trucker and showed him my phone when he came close. He finally stopped smiling and made it look like he was going into the service plaza. I looked in my right side view mirror and found him hiding behind a big white pillar in front of the plaza, staring at me again. I freaked out and asked the operator where the cops were and if I could leave because he was being ultra creepy. She told me to sit tight again because they should be there any minute, so I did. Then he came out of hiding and started walking towards my truck. I put it in drive just in case and told the operator what he was doing. I refused to make eye contact with him but kept watching my mirrors to make sure I knew where he was. The smile was back, and he started walking in circles around my truck, looking at it as if looking for a way to get in. I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until he circled back behind me, floored it, and told the operator I wasn't waiting one more second for the police. She apologized and told me the police would look for the man and talk to him if they found him, and that I should focus on getting home safely while keeping an eye out for him. I don't know if they did that or not, but I know none of that would have happened if I had my boyfriend with me. So not only can't I walk alone, but I also can't drive alone as a female. Nice to know,